Welcome everyone to Legion Gaming. I'm your host Donnie, and tonight I'm joined by a special guest host, the 8BitBarrister, Vito. Vito, how are you doing this fanciful, fortuitous evening for this opportunity we have right now?
Pretty good for a Monday. Can't complain.
I would say so. This is episode 76, and it's a bit of a special one because Deucy got sick over the last couple weeks, and we're going to do a whole episode kind of revisiting 1995 and the significance of the PlayStation launch, the Saturn launch, and really just this transition from 16-bit to 32-bit. So we kind of pivoted, and this is a totally different experience for Vito and I because we're kind of doing this as we call it via satellites in the 90s. So bear with us with audio quality and other things as we're kind of stumbly-wumbly through this. And as a result of the pivots, the last-minute pivot, we did something that we're both familiar with here and something that I actually recently posted about, and it's one of our favorite series ever, Terminator. So I think it'll be a pretty interesting episode because we're kind of talking about the movies, but it's more so the games leading up from like Terminator 1 up until really No Fate, which just came out last week. So I think it'll be a good time. Vito, I know you're pretty excited yourself because, by the way, thank you for joining me last minute on this thing because we literally put this together over like 2 days.
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Terminator 2 is one of my top 5 favorite movies. So when you said we're going to talk about Terminator, I was all in.
Yeah, I figured this was the way to do it because I was trying to think of like a topic that you and I are both really familiar with, and there's probably a lot, but I just posted and talked about Terminator Plus. I just played No Fate, obviously, and I was like, well, we could do this. Both you and I have a lot of history with Terminator, and I think it'll be a fun episode because we have more fondness for the games, which in some instances doesn't help in these cases because these games, for the most part, especially early on, aren't fantastic. They're not very good. But nonetheless, we still have a lot of memories with them, and we have some fondness that kind of make things better than they actually are.
Yeah, definitely the nostalgia plays into it for some of these games.
Yeah. So before we get into that, what have you been playing, Vito?
Well, one of the games that we're going to talk about, I have been playing, so I'll save that discussion for a little bit later.
That's
But
what I figured.
the two other ones I've been playing is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I have been enjoying my time with it. I think it is a pretty solid like B level, B grade entry into the series. There are some flaws with it.
I'd like
But,
to talk about those because you and I were kind of playing that in parallel, and like we got it obviously on launch, and we're kind of
yeah,
playing through it at I'd say at the same pace, and then I kind of blasted through it over the weekend after it came out, and it's only like 11 or 12 hours. So I'm curious what you think because I'm right there with you where I think it's I don't know, it's weird. It's like it's a good Metroid Prime 3 extension, but I almost would say that's not a very good Metroid game because some of the flaws of it that it has just don't work with Metroid at all.
yeah. I tend to agree with that. I think there's two really big flaws in the game for me. One is it doesn't really leave you open to kind of figure things out for yourself. If you're kind of meandering somewhere too long, someone will get on the radio and say, "Oh, have you thought about going to X place to do X thing?" And you're like, "That's,
Mhm.
that's not really Metroid." Like I want to be fumbling around and kind of figure it out on my own. That's how all the best Metroid games really are. The second
I'd say
major
that's
flaw, yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead, yeah.
No, I'd say the second major flaw is the open world, but please go ahead and talk about the
Well, that's exactly what I was about to mention is so they did kind of, shift the focus of the game into, like, this linear kind of sort of Metroidvania kinda thing because it tells you, like, after you get past the sort of first area, which is Fury Green, which is, like, this foresty area, it says, "Now you can go explore and do whatever you want," which actually isn't very true. Then you go through to the next section, and the levels or the biomes, which, by the way, are gorgeous, like, the art direction is really great in here, but, it's just kinda it kinda removes all the exploration out, and then the overworld, it forces you to traverse that way too much. Like, there's a point later in the game where you have to collect those green crystals, and you have to fill up this meter, and you have to do that, and I swear it's probably, like, a solid 2 hours of searching, like, if you're looking through as you kinda collect throughout the game, but I got to a point where I was getting near the end of the game, and it said, You don't have enough," and then, like you said, in the midst of you collecting these stupid crystals, which are only found in the open world, you have to run over them with a motorcycle, you have that idiot squad mate saying, "Hey, did you know you could do this?" Or, "You should go get more green crystals. Do you have enough?" So, it's flawed to me. Like, I enjoyed my time with it, I really like it, but I feel like there was some issues that were very not Metroid-like.
Yeah, the green crystal thing, I was very thankful that it was kind of spoiled online for me, and then you happen to tell me a
Same
little bit
here.
later. So I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to have to collect these, so I'm going to go and just smash through them wherever I see them. Just go out of my way now, so later I'm not stuck spending 2.5 hours trying to collect them all. So yeah,
Exactly, and that's I tried to do the same exact thing, and I still had, like, half of what I needed by the time I got to, like, the last third of the game, and there's no numerical value to them, it's just you run over it, and then you kinda meet these thresholds where you go back to the base, which is another aspect I didn't like, that now your sort of suit upgrades, some of them, like the cannon upgrades, you now have to go back to, like, the Fury Green hub. So now you're forced to go back to one area, like, 4 times to get your upgrades, in addition to cashing in these green crystals to get to the end of the game.
yeah, I thought having to go back to what's his name, Mackenzie or Miles Mackenzie, something like that.
Mhm,
When you got your
mhm.
chips, like your Thunder chip, your Ice chip, that you had to go back to see him at the main base. That to me was like an artificial way to just extend the length of the game. It almost
Exactly.
feels like Nintendo told Retro, like, we've spent way too much money on this. You need to just wrap it up, and we need to get this out. Like, polish it up, and we're gonna get it out. It is super polished, like it looks and runs really great on Switch 2. But
Mhm.
yeah, it just feels there's like a lot of filler, and it almost feels like they thought the players would be too stupid to figure out what to do, so they constantly
Yeah,
are feeding you info, you know?
and it sucks because the game plays amazingly well. It's one of the best looking Switch games by far. Like, it
Agreed.
looks incredible, especially if you run it at 120 frames per second in the boost mode or whatever it is.
Yep.
And then the biomes are really amazing. They're really fun to traverse and anything like that. But it's just once you get into that open world, that's when it all just kind of it doesn't fall apart. It's so antithetical to what Metroid feels like, and then it just feels like it's so centered towards like combat and like this open world that really isn't interesting. To where it's like it doesn't ruin the game, but it definitely keeps it out of the upper tier of Metroid games for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Metroid Prime, the original and the remaster are, I always say they go neck and neck with Super Metroid as to which one's my favorite. It kind of depends on how I'm feeling that day. And this is like
Sure.
well below that, but it's not like a bad game at all. Like, I am enjoying. I'm not quite done with it yet. I've been juggling other things, but I have been
Yeah.
enjoying my time with it. I just think they made some decisions that don't quite work out. And I'm hopeful that it sells enough that Nintendo will let Retro do another one, and maybe they'll learn from these kind of mistakes and pull what worked and what didn't, into another Metroid Prime 5. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hopeful. It's like, it was an enjoyable time. It's like a solid 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like, like Dread, I played through like 5 or 6 times in pretty quick succession because I really love Dread. And
Yeah.
I haven't had the urge so far to get back in the Prime 4 just yet to kind of like play through it again because partly I'm dreading that whole green crystal stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a conflicting Metroid game for me, is what I'll
Y-
say.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. But I think it's if you're a fan of the series, I mean, it's definitely worth a play through, at least one, so you could see,
Mhm.
experience it. But I wouldn't put it in the top like tier of Metroid games at all.
Yeah, and
Um,
like maybe middle of the pack at best. At
yeah,
best. Yeah.
yeah, agreed.
What else have you been playing there, Vito?
So the other game I recently picked up, and it's been out on Switch 2 for a while, but I wouldn't get it because it was a game key card. It was the Yakuza Zero Director's Cut.
Oh, you
So
started there, that's cool.
yeah, on PS5. I've been really nostalgic for Japan, and I was like, I just want a game where it's like a pseudo kind of open world Japan, and I could go just do random kind of like Shenmue type things in the middle of when I'm trying to
That's why
whatever.
I love those games. They're so
Yeah,
good at that because they just have all the dumb stuff from Shenmue that you love that is just they're small details, but it's just sort of like I guess it really is like a slice of life in Japan in a sense in some way.
yeah. And what's cool is I didn't realize this is that they actually have like legitimate businesses like in the game, like Don Quixote is like in the game, and you could go shop at Don Quixote, which is really cool. All they need is the
Mhm.
music to be playing in the background while you're there, and it'd be spot on. As far as like the plot of the game goes, like I mean, I I kind of don't really know what's happening. Really, it's kind of like there's like a plot of land that all the different yakuza like lieutenants are fighting over, and you expel your what's his name? I can't think of the
Is
main
it
character's
Kiryu?
name.
The main
Yeah,
character
Kiryu.
Kiryu?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he basically like leaves the yakuza to help prove that his adopted dad wasn't responsible for the situation that happens. But I'm very early in the game because I tend to be just like effing around doing all this random stuff like singing karaoke and playing baseball and
Yeah. The mini
bowling or
games are so
whatever.
fun in there.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, I've only done one mission and I'm still in the those games are very exposition heavy at the beginning, so I still don't know if I'm through all that yet, but it's like I'm just doing all
I've
the random
only
crap.
So I've only played a handful of Yakuza games. I finished obviously the RPG ones, except for the first Like a Dragon, but I finished those. But the ones I played, including like Judgments and what was the first one before Judgment? Oh no, the second
Oh,
was Lost Judgment. It was just called Judgment. But
mm,
they start off super slow. Like I swear it's like solid 4 or 5 hours before you really got to get into the groove of the missions because it's also tutorializing so much, like all the side quests and like you said, all the small stuff you can do, side activities, and then it's introducing like characters that will probably be important 20 hours later.
yeah.
So it takes a while to get up. But I think you have the general gist at least at the beginning.
Yeah. What I really like about this one is it's like the brawler Yakuza, so it's not the what do you call it? The other type of combat. I'm completely blanking on it. The
The
turn-based.
RPG,
Yeah, the
yeah.
RP. Yeah, so it's not so like a dragon, Yakuza like a dragon. I like it, but it doesn't like suck me in because that type of combat to me like just I start tuning myself out, and that's one
Yeah,
thing
it's
that
much slower, yeah.
right. It's slow, and that's one thing that Clair Obscur did really well for a turn base is it kept me like into it, which I
Mhm.
really like. And Yakuza, like a dragon, I will tune out of it. But this brawler based like real time combat of Yakuza Zero, I'm like into it. I'm like, okay, this is good. I'm like changing my fighting styles and mix and matching. So I'm like into it.
Yeah, it's a great time. I played through parts of or most of, Yakuza Kiwami, which I think is a remake of the first game,
It is,
and I
yeah.
think I played through parts of, Yakuza 3, I think, but
Mhm.
it's just they're hard it's just I get distracted with other stuff, that's all it is, like, they're really great time because like you said, they're just brawler beat 'em ups, like 3D
Mhm.
beat 'em ups,
Yeah,
and there's really goofy, but they also have a lot of melodrama, which is why I appreciate that series a lot more is because it kinda melds those 2 things together where it's like it knows when to be really stupid and goofy, but it also turns up the Japanese, crime drama up to, like, 11 sometimes.
totally. Yeah.
It's a great time, yeah.
Yep.
For I've been playing, well, we talked about Metro Prime 4, that was really the big thing I've been playing for a while, and then I finally started Mafia: The Old Country, which you had been recommending for basically, like, the entire year since I guess it's
Yeah.
been out for a while now, right? Like, since
Yeah.
August or July or something like that?
Yeah. A
Yeah.
few like 4 or 5 months, something like that. Yeah.
So I started that, and I think I'm about 5 chapters in, so it's starting to get going now because it's pretty slow in the beginning. Like it has a really great sort of setup with the whole like you're basically sort of like a mine slave in a sense, and you escape the sulfur mines in Sicily, and then you happen upon Don Teresi, who's like this big old mob boss of that area. And then the sulfur mine bosses try to capture you, and Don Teresi's like, no, you're trespassing, get out of here, and he kind of takes you under your wing. So it's sort of like the buildup of this person named Enzo, who I'm sure probably becomes like a mob boss later, but sort of him like getting the blood oath. I don't know what they call it. I already forgot the name.
Oh,
Um,
I can't
but
remember either.
yeah, but it was a pretty cool scene where it's like they're like in like a basement, and then he burns the car of the saint, and like they
Mhm.
they draw blood because it's sort of like a blood oath. So I'm getting to the point where now like your character Enzo is really starting to get into with the family, like he's made the blood oath. So now he's like he's bound to the family, like his whole everything about his life revolves around Don Teresi. So it's starting to get really really good. I will say like it does start off slower than I
Yeah.
expected. Like there's so much of like when they kind of like make you go on the horse and make you go like on a straight line kind of
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and you can have like a little skirmish with enemies. It was really slow where it's like you just had like you fight like 5 or 6 enemies, go on a horse for a while, then you have to take like Isabella out there, who's like the Don's daughter, and then there's a skirmish there. Then you have to take the car back to another place. So there's a lot of like zipping you around with no real sort of purpose necessarily, because like there's this open world aspect to it, but you can't really explore it yet.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's only a couple times where it will give you opportunity in the story mode to actually go like free reign because it'll say, okay, you got to go to X place and it'll be like whatever, 50
yeah.
miles away, whatever the distance is. It's really far, so you have time to explore, but most of the time it's pretty guided.
That's what it seemed like, and I was wondering if it opens up later because the last Mafia game I played through was Mafia Definitive Edition, which was a remake of the first Mafia game, and I enjoyed my time with it. It was super linear, which I liked because it was kinda clunky, even though it was a remake, like, it still felt like a 2002 game, and that never really opened up either. Like, it had a couple sections that were slightly more open, I'll say, but it's still like most you can find like a like a city block or something.
Mhm.
But so far, Mafia Old Country has been really, really good. Like the production is really outstanding too. Like I'm really impressed with the character models, the voice acting. Like even you said, like the Sicilian dialect. I toggled that on for a bit, and it was really great because sometimes it reminds me of like listening to my uncle and my mom sometimes talk in some way,
Yeah,
you know. So it's a
yeah.
good time so far. I'm glad I got it on sale for like $20, 25. So I'm glad I'm
Mhm.
playing out because I know it's only was like 12 or 15 hours. It's a pretty
Yeah,
tight little game.
I think it took me 15, but I also took advantage of those times where it let me like free reign, so I could go find the Trinacrias and newspapers,
Mhm.
and there's like the Saint cards that you could find around. So I'd get those.
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it's definitely like a
That
10 to 12 hours, brisk. It's pretty quick.
that's fine. It's I need to change from, like, Ghost of Tsushima and some of those other bigger games that I'm playing, you know? So it's like sometimes I like having these smaller games that are kinda bite-sized where it's like
Yeah.
I don't have to I can commit so much time to it, but it's also the story is primarily the focus, so it's kind of a it's a big of a change, or a bit of a change,
Mhm,
excuse me.
mhm.
All right, Vito. Well, I guess now it's no better time than ever. Let's talk about some more Terminator. All right, Vito, we're here. We're talking about one of our favorite movies ever, one of our favorite series ever. And really, this is just sort of a bit of a chronology of the early Terminator games leading up to Terminator 2D No Fate, which just came out last week. So, really, we're kind of going to be touching on a lot of the games we played here, some from the other side. I won't be covering like basically anything after RoboCop versus Terminator. Like, I won't be covering like the Terminator 3 games or Salvation. We'll kind of touch on those maybe because I played a handful of them, but for the most part, this is really about Terminator 1 and 2 and RoboCop versus Terminator, and then more importantly, Terminator Resistance and of course No Fate. So for the movies, if you somehow haven't seen this, which I imagine if you listen to this podcast, you have to be of the age where you grew up with the Terminator and the significance and what kind of movie it was for the 80s and how impactful it was to the sci-fi and action genres. But it was released in 1984. It's all about this about a machine that has been sent back through time in the 1984 to kill Sarah Connor, who will eventually birth uh, the sort of leader of the resistance in the future, because in the future in 2029 there's judgment day that happens where Skynet, which is this artificial intelligence, becomes rogue and self-aware. It then attacks the world, essentially setting off nukes everywhere, and the future is just this dystopic nightmare where it's just a war between the machines and humans. So the Terminator is sent back in time to kill the mother of the leader of the resistance. Very convoluted, because what you add to this is Kyle Reese, who's actually John Connor's father, who's from the future. So
Yeah.
there's a bit of a predestination aspect to this whole thing too, where it's like he sent back John in the future sent back his dad in 1984 to save himself and to save his mother from so that he can be
Well,
born and basically save the humans.
here's an interesting thought though. If Kyle Reese goes back in time and then the Terminator 2 happens, they stop Judgment Day, completely stops. Does that mean John Connor then is erased from existence because he never would have sent Kyle Reese back?
I suppose that would be a bit of a paradox at that point. That's kind of the
Yeah,
idea, right? Because
right.
that's the thing is when we can poke holes, like because James Cameron's an amazing director. Like we could obviously just say that he's definitely a visionary. He's one of the most influential directors ever. But it's like obviously if you think a little bit deeper beneath the surface of things, like of course you're going to pick holes and be like, okay, well there's a lapse in continuity here that doesn't make sense. But these are kind of ways where it's like you just kind of have to accept it for what it is and appreciate the grandness of the plots and what it's trying to do, and just kind of don't think about these paradoxes that make no damn sense.
Yeah, like I have to
So
say, it's just the movie.
exactly, yeah. Did you? So I don't know about you, Vito, but had you seen Terminator 1 before 2 when you were a kid? Because I saw 2
No.
first.
Yeah,
I
it
was
was
the
the
same boat,
same thing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of Terminator 1, Kyle Reese dies. So another paradox there. So it's like in the future. So at this point, Kyle Reese in 1984, I don't know what age he would have been. I don't think he would have been born yet. So it's really where that Kyle Reese was sent from the future to 1984. He dies in 1984, and he still is the father of John Connor, which they don't meet until way later. But Kyle Reese ends up dying at the end of Terminator 1. Sarah survives because the T-800 that is played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, they end up in like this factory or this pressing plant kind of thing where it crushes the T-800 and they survive. And then the twist here is that Cyberdyne, a company, this was actually the lead scene, I think, in Terminator 1. I think it was on the DVD or something.
Yeah.
They show Cyberdyne discovering the chip and the arm, which would be significant to the plots of Terminator 2, which basically allows Cyberdyne to basically get a head start in developing Skynet and the machines. It's a pretty incredible thing. So there's a whole sort of story related to the fact that John had to send someone back to save himself. But by doing that, he also sort of accelerated Judgment Day in a sense too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty wild sort of ripple effect of things. So Terminator 2 in 1991, this came out in 91. I was very young when this came out. It was July 1991. The only memory I really have of this before I saw it was I remember being in the car with my family, and like we drove by a theater because I don't think I'd been a theater yet then. But I just remember seeing like a giant line and the Terminator 2 poster out on the on the front of the theater, and that was like my first sort of like, oh wow, like this is a pretty big deal, right?
I don't remember it. Like I remember things about the movie being out in the theaters, like the action figures and other things like that were out in the stores at the same time. But I don't remember it actually being in the theater. So that's actually a cool memory to have, to see all those people waiting for the movie.
It's pretty cool. And like I didn't really understand at the time either, because I think like my half uncle was working at the theater or something. So we just drove by because he was working that night. And it didn't really click to me until I was much older. I was like, oh, like that was sort of the the beginnings of Terminator 2 for me, is like seeing that line outside.
Yeah.
Now, we were like 6 years old, and I know that I had seen it on tape, but I forgot, Vito, did you say you had seen it for the first time because of my recorded tape, or did your mom have you see it?
No, yeah, so basically, like I said, I had seen all the action figures and the video games and stuff, and my parents were buying me the toys. So I don't know, we were probably like first grade, somewhere around there, kindergarten, first grade.
First or
And I
second
remember,
grade, yeah.
yeah, and I remember begging my mom. I was like, I need to see this movie. I have all the toys, and my mom at first was kind of like, "It's rated R. You can't watch that. You're 6 years old. There's a lot of violence." So I just kept like begging her, and she had this coworker that made like bootleg copies of like movies. So we got a
I didn't know
bootleg
that
copy.
part.
Yeah, like back in the early '90s, and we got this like bootleg copy of Terminator 2, and she's like, "Okay." She's like, we're going to watch this movie, but you can't say anything they say in the movie, and you can't do anything they do in the movie. And that was the first time I saw it, and it was the first rated R movie that my parents let me officially watch.
That was like your first contract with your parents. Like, no, I will
Yeah.
not repeat anything that's said in Terminator 2.
Yeah.
So Terminator 2, for me, Vito, I'm sure it's probably the same for you, but it's really like top 2 movie for me. It's
Yeah.
up there with The Matrix. Like for me, that's like my top 2 movies is The Matrix and Terminator 2, and they're really just like 1A, 1B. But
Mhm.
the plot of Terminator 2, or excuse me, I should say, like, where would you rank it on yours, Vito? Because I know you and I have the same amount of love for this movie, especially
Yeah.
specifically 2.
It's easily top 5. My favorite movie is Raiders of the Lost Ark. I might put Back to the Future like number 2, but this is like, it's got to be like
That's number
at least
3.
3. Yeah, at least.
Yeah, I'd say my well, I'll say top 4, because that's, to me, these are movies that are like infinitely rewatchable. It's The Matrix, Terminator 2, Back to the Future, and actually I have American Movie up there. It's like one of my favorite documentaries ever, and I could rewatch that infinitely. But
Mm.
Terminator 2, the plot of this movie is far more grander than Terminator 1. Technology also advanced quite a bit since Terminator 1, because also you have to figure probably that James Cameron was a very young director, and he probably didn't have a ton of money with Terminator 1, but it made so much money that it afforded him more stuff for Terminator 2. And the plot of Terminator 2 it involves, once again, this is on like 1991 in the movie, and John is kind of 10, which is, again, a bit of a mismatch for how old he's supposed to be, because in 84, he wasn't born yet, but then like this is supposed to be like 91, 94, something like that. And then, he's like a 12 or 13-year-old ever furlong. So in this timeline, they send back a T-800 who's Arnold again, and the twist is that he's now a good guy in here because he's reprogrammed in the future from John, and a T1000, which is this mimetic polyalloy liquid metal that can transform into like basically any kind of metal, any kind of object, is not complex machines, as it says in the movie. And the T1000 is way more advanced than the T800. It can form into like knives. It can do all kinds of things. It can shift itself through bars. And it's on the hunt for John Connor. So that adds another layer there. And on top of it, a key point in the movie is when you find out that Sarah Connor has been committed to like this sort of a insane asylum of sorts, or this mental institution, for her sort of conspiracy theories about the dystopic future of Judgment that's impending. So the whole plot of the movie is just getting John Connor to survive because Arnold is trying to protect him. T1000 is in total pursuit. It's honestly just one of the greatest sci-fi action movies ever made. It's one of the greatest sequels made. It's, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it really is one of the best movies ever made.
So I was reading somewhere, this was a while ago, that the marketing for the movie before it came out hid the fact that Arnold was now the good guy. And so
Yes.
it kind of had like this Empire Strikes Back moment where at first you think Arnold's coming to be the bad guy and the cop is actually the good guy, but then they like flipped that on its head, which I thought was
Yes.
really cool. Like it must have been mind blowing in the theater to experience that in
Well,
1991.
and I've read the same because when I was when I was a teenager, I found the script book at a local comic shop. I actually read through the script because I loved it so much. And there was a point where James Cameron was talking about there. He wanted to leave it sort of ambiguous, where you see Robert Patrick in the cop uniform, so you naturally kind of think, well, he's the good guy. Like he's a slender kind of Kyle Reese guy. Like he should be the good guy who's protecting John. And it flips on his head when you see that Arnold is the good guy and Robert Patrick, the cop, is the bad guy. And it's interesting because I read a preview about one of the games we'll talk about, the Terminator 2 for Nintendo. And in the preview, the developer was talking about how they won't spoil much of the story because they just say that Arnold's in it and Robert Patrick's in it or a cop's in it, but they don't tell you who's who necessarily. But by the time I had seen stuff about this movie, it was already spoiled to me. Like I didn't realize it was supposed to be left ambiguous, right? Like I just thought that it was a known fact that Arnold's the good guy this time.
I kind of had like the reverse situation because I saw this first and Arnold was a good guy. When I went back later and watched Terminator 1, it was kind of like shocking to see them as a bad guy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, wait a minute.
This isn't right.
Yeah. So that's kind of the setup for the movies. I was, again, it's like, we don't want to go too deep into them because Vito and I could honestly talk about the first two movies quite a bit because we know them so well, especially part two. But like anything in the early 90s, these kind of movies had to have some sort of game property attached to them or some sort of a multi-platform release. So that's where you get all of these games. And spoiler alert, most of these games are not very fantastic or not very great. I guess I'll put it lightly in that sense.
Yeah, I was going to say
I don't want to say they're terrible. Like, yeah, there's some that might not be great. So we'll kind of go through the early games and then we'll kind of get through, like I said, we're all going towards Terminator 2D No Fate. So we'll kind of start with the first games based on the first movie. Vito, so I know you have some experience with some of these. So we'll talk about the Terminator NES game. And there's actually sort of two versions, I guess, that we can kind of define here. So the first one, which was never actually released because it was converted, there was one to be released by Sunsoft. It was supposed to come out in 1989. It had been shown at the 1989 Winter Consumer Electronics Show, but it was actually canceled when Sunsoft lost the movie rights because apparently I don't know if it was Orion or whoever owned the license, essentially told Sunsoft that the story of the game did not follow the film enough and that they wanted to focus on Kyle Reese battling Skynet. So at this point, Sunsoft lost the license, and I didn't even know this, but the game was converted to something called Journey to Silius, which you've played before, which I've heard of since, but I have no experience with this game.
Yeah, so I played it through emulation. I would like to get a physical copy of it, but even before I knew that it was started as a Terminator game, I remember playing it and thinking, "This is kind of like Terminator." It's
Yeah, that's
if
really funny.
you're a Kyle Reese type character, you're destroying machines. It has the same vibe and feel and
Mhm.
all that. It just doesn't have the license. And I think actually there was it might have been like revealed in a Nintendo Power where they actually showed the licensed version of Journey to Silius as a Terminator game. The reveal
Oh,
was
I
like
didn't
in a
know that.
Nintendo, yeah. So there's actually some pictures, like screen grabs of the gameplay as a Terminator game that are
I have to
floating
look
around on
that
the
up.
internet. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't recall if I had heard that tidbit before, because I've heard of Journey to Silius, but I didn't realize it was a conversion of that. So I just thought that was really interesting that they like I can't imagine like you're in the middle of this development, they're like, "Hey, you're not doing it right, so change
Yeah,
that because
and
we're taking the license away from you.
I feel like a lot that happened to a lot of Nintendo or early games. Like they would have a license and then they would lose the license and it would just change into some random, whatever IP or whatever. Or games
Mhm.
in Japan would start like as this is a Mickey Mouse game, and then it would come over to the US and be Kid Clown or something, you know?
Well, I guess it's kind of like the reverse irony that Doki Doki Panic was in
Yeah.
Japan, right? And then that got converted to a Mario game for us in the
Y-
US. So
Yeah.
it's just weird when I see that with like a licensed property. I feel like I don't really see that too often. At least I don't read about it, you know?
Yeah.
So they eventually did release a formal version or an actual version. It was done by a developer called Rackle Entertainment, which I'm not too familiar with. And this one is a pretty stinky game on the Nintendo. I played it over the weekend because there was the angry video game nerd who done a video about this like I don't know a decade and a half ago, and I hadn't actually played it. And he's not too far off in his his sort of over exaggerated assessment of the game. It's pretty ugly. You play as Kyle Reese in the future, and like it's more of like this weird, almost like platform or a puzzle game in some senses. Like you're just jumping back and forth up to different levels, and eventually get to like the surface, and it's just like this ugly gray mess. You have hordes of T-800s just coming at you at all times. You're shooting, and it's like you're crouched, and your gun points up, down, or straight. You can't really aim properly. It is just a mess of a freaking game. I think I would have been pretty upset if I got this as a kid, hoping I was going to get like a good Terminator game because it almost has nothing to do with much of the movie.
Yeah, I remember renting the NES version from Blockbuster in sometime in the 90s, and that was probably the last time I played it. But I
Mhm.
remember being like in a sewer and the
That's
controls
the
were really
first level.
awful. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And like I couldn't control Kyle Reese like very well at all, and I just kept dying, and it was like a miserable weekend because I couldn't get out of the first stage.
Yeah. So I got through stage 1 and 2, I think, and then you do get to go sort of in present time, which is like, or excuse me, I should say like 1984 in the game. And
Yeah.
it doesn't get any better. It's just, it's just as bad as it was before. But the collision detection here is particularly awful. Like making jumps is really difficult because it feels like you have to be very precise, or like his feet have to land a certain way or something
Yeah.
stupid. And it's just a mess of a freaking game. And unfortunately, the other versions aren't that much better either. So we'll kind of talk about the two worst versions here. It's the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo versions. Did you play either of these back in the day, Vito? Or have you had a chance to?
To this day, I still haven't played them. I think it's because I had such a
Okay.
bad experience with NES that I just didn't go back to it.
Well, these aren't much better because I vividly remember renting the Genesis one. This is released February 1992. So you have to consider too, like this is what, like 8 years after the movie came out, long after.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the beginning of the first level of the Genesis version, you fight. It's sort of like an HK tank, one of the hunter killer tanks, and that's the first enemy you fight. And it's not even like a boss. It's just the first time it towers over you. And the worst thing about the first level is like you're just lobbing grenades over and over. So you lob them in an arc, which sucks. You throw them over enemies, and the first enemy you fight also just like bulldozes you. So I vividly remember ranking this as a kid and just like getting destroyed at that first couple of screens. I was like, "What the hell is this?" Like I was only 7 or 8 years old, wherever it was. I was like, "I don't understand what this is." And then once you get past that first section, you go into like these tight corridors where, again, you have sort of an influx of infinitely spawning T-800s with the skin on them. So they kind of they don't look like Arnold, but they just look like generic soldiers.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like the Fester's Quest thing where it's like your weapons hit the walls, so don't hit the enemies. So it's like you
Oh
can either
yeah.
lob the grenades, or you could do what I did, which is really stupid, which is just crouch and like roll the grenades towards them over and over and over.
Whatever it takes to
It's
get the
not
job done.
exactly. It's just so painfully annoying. So then after, there's a few levels. I forgot how many levels there are. I think there's like 8 or 9 or something like that in here. But you eventually do get to play as Kyle, and he has like a sawed-off shotgun. But again, like it doesn't make the game any better. It's just not a very good game. I think it looks pretty good. Like it's kind of impressive that it kind of tries to follow the first movie and try to do like the future war stuff, but it's just not good. Everything's just like insanely difficult. It's just not a very good game. And then the Super Nintendo one, I did get to try this one a little bit as well. It's I don't want to say it's similar to the Genesis one because it's more of like a Contra shooter, but holy crap, the sound is pretty bad. The collision detection isn't great either. You have a lot of damage from like explosives, like things when you destroy things, the explosion like hits you. The first level felt like it went on for 15 minutes or something obnoxious, and like you don't really find health pickups in here either. So it's just brutally difficult. I don't think I couldn't get past the first level because it was so lengthy and I had so limited lives. I was just I don't think I played this when I was a kid. Yeah, I think this is just something that I never got to see and I always wanted to rent. And I feel like this is a little bit better than Genesis 1, but it's also worse because of how freaking hard it is.
Yeah, it's probably one of those games where they just made it extremely difficult so you wouldn't rent it and just buy it, you know?
I feel like they had to because it is like it's shockingly long the first level. Like you should watch a YouTube video if you haven't Vito and just like check it out because
Oh, I will.
it's almost offensive.
Yeah, no, I'll check it out. I gotta see this.
Yeah, and the last one I kind of want to touch on here is actually a very great version that I just played for the first time this weekend. It's the Sega CD version that was released in June 1993. It was developed and published by Virgin Games, and this one is a totally different game than the Sega Genesis one. This one is actually a composite shooter. So you start out as Kyle Reese in the future. It has like a lot of different layers on the levels, which are really cool. Like it's set in the future war stuff. So the T800s look really great. It's very much like a Contra style shooter. The music is really incredible. It's done by Tommy Tallarico, who did like Aladdin. I think he did like Earthworm Jim and a handful of other games. He's a pretty notable composer, I would say, especially for the early 90s. And
Right.
this one just was really impressive. Like I was shocked at how good it felt and it played. Like it still had some flaws. But you know, it's not perfect, but it's a much better game than the other versions by far.
Yeah, I've never played this actually, but I own a physical copy of it because everyone online and that were especially Terminator fans said that it was one of the best Terminator games. The music was awesome, and not only that, it's one of the best Sega CD games. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this. I don't own a Sega
Yeah.
CD. I'm just gonna have it. One day I'll be able to play it somehow, either through emulation or I'll get a Sega CD. You know, but yeah, I heard nothing but good things about this one.
I'd like to get a Sega CD because I did want that when I was a kid too. But you
Yeah,
know, for
same.
now, I dealt with the emulation, and it's definitely worth playing. I say like out of these initials that we talked about, the initial four, like the Sega Genesis, NES, and Sega CD version, like definitely go seek out the Sega CD version because
Mm.
it's really cool. It has some cool Sega CD effects. Like there's a point in the fourth level where you actually encounter a T100 going back in time to their time displacement equipment. And that's
Mm.
when you go in as Reese, like you follow him through there, and then it sets you back in the 1984, and you have like the little like what do you call it? That sawed-off shotgun that Kyle
Mhm.
has,
Mhm.
and then you fight punks, which are kind of similar to the punks that Arnold finds in the beginning of Terminator One. It's a really well-made game. I was really impressed with this one. Um, so now we'll kind of talk about briefly because I have no experience with these two, but they were notable for certain reasons. There's a set of Terminator games that were made by Bethesda of all developers in the early 90s. There was the Terminator, which is based on the original movie. It's sort of like a sandbox 3D game of Los Angeles, and you have to protect Sarah. And then there's also a mode where you can play as the Terminator hunting Kyle and Sarah. There's the Terminator 2029, which was on DOS in 92. This one is more of a future war kind of thing. The Terminator Rampage. I hadn't heard of this one, but this is like a Wolfenstein 3D kind of shooter, which I actually want to track down. And I think the most noble one that, again, I have no experience with, but I've heard how great it is the Terminator Future Shock. This is one that was released in 1995. It's a first-person shooter. It kind of reminds me of like a Duke Nukem kind of game, like just the sort of the
Mhm.
style. Like I forgot, I think it's like a build engine shooter or something like that. At least that's what it looks like. But the big thing about this game is apparently the first game to use mouse look to look
What?
around, which you know common now, obviously,
You're
but
right.
back then, like, with Doom, like, yeah, the arrow keys and whatnot, and Terminator Future Shock was apparently the first to involve mouse looking, which, 95 wasn't that long ago relative to us. So it's pretty crazy that that was the origins of first person shooting and looking, sort of like looking up on a vertical or lower axis. It's
I
pretty
had no
incredible.
idea these games existed until you sent me the notes. I was like, I had no clue Bethesda made Terminator games.
I had heard of Future Shock because there was a lot of people, there was a lot of sort of like cult love for that, I guess we could call it, where I've heard people talk about it. I've just never played it because I didn't have a PC back then, and even then, I probably couldn't run this if I wanted to. And PC games were just hard to come by when we weren't playing them back then. Like none of my friends were really on PC either. Like until I don't know, like '96. Like we used to play on your Mac in like
Yeah, the Mac
1994, whatever that was.
with 3
We were
games
playing
that I
like
have on there.
like Mario teaches typing, and I forgot
Yeah.
what that oh geez, I forgot that Wordle kind of game. I forgot the hell it
And
was.
there was that one vector, like, shooter game that was
The
on there
tank
too.
one.
The tank game,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the name of it.
So that was the extent of our PC
Right.
gaming at that time. Yeah. So after the Terminator games that were released based on the original movie, of course, Terminator 2, being an even bigger property, an even bigger movie, had all kinds of different kind of media. Like there was action figures, there was I think was there a cartoon video? Do you remember if there was a cartoon for Terminator? I can't recall. I don't think there
I
was.
don't think there was a Terminator cartoon, and if there was, I don't remember.
Yeah, I
But
don't
I
remember. I
don't
don't
think there
think so
was.
too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like they had, like those toys where I think you posted about it recently too, Vito, where they had where you could
Yeah.
create like the skin over the endoskeleton robot kind of cyborg thing. Like you would put it
Yeah.
in like a vat or something.
Yeah, so it came with my mom and dad got it for me at J.C. Penney's, I think it was, and we
Mhm.
brought it home, and it was like you had a powder that it came with, which is full of, it's the 90s, so it's probably full of some carcinogens, like who the hell knows. And you mix it with the water, and you put the endoskeleton in the little tank, and then you put the mixture in, let it sit, and it
Yeah.
creates the skin. Makes a huge mess, and then the first time we used it, my mom's like, "Yeah, we're not using this again." It went in the shed for 20 years, got destroyed. I wish I still had it just for display, but yeah, good times. The
Yeah.
one time I
I
used it.
I think it'd be a really cool novelty now because like I've seen that at a retro toy store nearby, and I was kind of tempted. I didn't ask how much it was because I didn't even know what it was, but I just looked. I was like, damn, I wanted that thing so bad when I was a kid. After seeing it at your house, because you had like a couple of the figures, I think too. Like
Yeah,
I remember you had one with like I think it was like a bionic arm or somewhere like that. I
yeah,
remember in like a purple shirt.
he had like a purple shirt. One sleeve was torn off. He had like you could change out his arm. I had it was like the
Yeah.
Terminator car with the skull
Yep,
in
I
the
remember
front.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Just
So
the
it's kind
'90s,
of ironic. Yeah, it's kind of ironic in that sense because what we're trying to let on here is the fact that these are rated R movies and they kind of converted this into something that they marketed to kids like our age, like 6 to 10 years old or teenagers. Like the games are one thing because you could argue like they kind of made them for like the teenagers and above, but they really weren't because kids were playing these things. So it's pretty interesting. Like there was Rambo, I forgot what other properties. There was RoboCop, a few other things that were like these Toxic Avenger that were like these rated R adult properties, and they made like a cartoon out of them, or like they marketed toys or sleeping bags or whatever you can imagine they could sort of monetize. They did back then. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So with that, oh, go ahead, Vito.
No, the hard R, like I always just laugh about that. These hard R rated, movies that they marketed to kids. It's like, could you imagine, like, I don't know, like what's the recent rated R movie I watched? Like Wolf of Wall Street. They made like action figures now for Wolf of Wall Street or something. Just crazy. I know it's not an action
Or like
movie, but
or a
still.
Terrifier, like, can you imagine if they made, like, I'm sure they probably do actually, I probably could look up if they made, like, blankets for Terrifier or, like, a Terrifier cartoon that's,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's wild to think about now, but it was a common thing back then, like, just
It
that was
was.
just normal, you know?
The '90s were
So
wild.
they were they were a wild time, yeah. So with that, they released a bunch of games based on Terminator 2. So we'll talk about the two big ones. It's really Terminator 2 Judgment Day and Terminator 2 Arcade Game. I guess we could talk about Terminator 2 Arcade Game because we played that a little bit less than the other ones, I think. The arcade game, I mean, this is one of the most infamous arcade cabinets to me personally. Like when I've seen this as a kid, it's really notable. It's by Midway. It's kind of like Area 51 and those Lycan shooters of the old times that you'd see all the time. The big thing with this is it had these really two badass looking Uzis that were on the
Yeah.
cabinet because that was the whole thing. It was just like a shooter, and also like it had Arnold on the sides of it. It was just like one of those more awesome cabinets you'd walk by and like, oh, I gotta play that. And they did port this to basically everything, which is kind of shocking. They released it on the Game Boy, Game Gear, the Genesis, and Super Nintendo. All got versions of this. They all have like 7 levels, with the exception of Game Gear and Game Boy. I forget how many levels those have, but I've never played those versions. I imagine they're absolutely terrible because I can't imagine playing this fast-paced, brutally difficult Lycan shooter on a condensed screen like that. I've only played the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions, which are both similar in a lot of ways, but they have similar concessions to both. Like the Genesis has more muted colors, doesn't have as many effects. I remember playing this a lot as a kid because it was an arcade shooter, but the downside is like you had a controller. Did you play this much as a kid? I imagine you probably play at my house too. I think when I probably played it
Yeah.
a handful of times.
So on the Super Nintendo version, did you have to use the Super Scope or any other
You
peripheral?
It was an option. So you
Okay.
could use the Super Scope, the Super Nintendo mouse, or a controller. Um, and of course, like I don't know if I think I got a Super Scope way later. Like I traded some comics for it from a friend,
I remember
so I
you
didn't get to
having
play
one.
arcade game. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really fun. I never got to use it on Terminator arcade game. I don't know how good that would feel because it's like a bazooka. but it's still probably better than a cursor because this is really difficult. Like this is an arcade game, so by nature it's made to just eat your quarters the entire time, and it doesn't translate well because it does the same thing on the home ports, but it shouldn't be that way. If anything, it's probably to combat rentals, if anything. But it's not very fun because you lose your lives quick. I remember one of the first bosses. It's against like an HK tank. It just took like thousands of bullets, it felt like, because everything just shoots like a machine gun. Like there's T-800s on the screen. You can accidentally shoot your teammates, like your other resistance members on there, which sucks, and you lose a life. So, these games are fun for what they are. Like I think there's an arcade one-up cabinet that exists. I don't think it's been re-released since. Like that's probably the only re-release this will ever get, I think. It'd be cool if there was like, if like Limited Run did something where it had like Joy-Con support, like that actually be pretty badass if it did something like that.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Actually, what's kind of funny is about a year ago, maybe we had a work Christmas party at this retro kind of arcade like bar restaurant, and there was actually the Terminator arcade original cabinet there. So I played it, within the last like year or two in the actual arcade, like the original cabinet. I was like, this is pretty cool. I don't know if I really want to go back to play it on home consoles anymore, especially, I can't use the light gun peripheral anymore on modern TV.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I really want to experience it with a controller,
You could do it with the mouse, like it's not ideal either, but it's better than like a controller cursor,
Right. Yeah.
But it's worth checking out. Like I'm sure if you're listening, you might have seen this, I'm sure at some point in your life, because it's one of the more famous arcade cabinets and one of the more famous arcade games of that time, I would say too. And also there's the badass pinball machine that I would see sometimes, and I actually play that at the local carousel we had when we were kids. Like I remember it had the handgun as the ball launcher, which again, probably shouldn't be made aware of that when I was like 6 or 7 years old, but it was a really badass machine. Yeah. And then the other games that we'll talk about through here, because I played through most of these, not through them, but I played most of them. And then Vito and you and I have a sort of fondness for one particular version. So there are 8 and 16-bit versions of the Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which this one is based on the movie. So it's more of a traditional action game. It's not like an arcade shooter or anything like that. Like there's a lot of sort of platforming and other things that frankly don't mix well with Terminator, but here we are. So we'll talk about the 8-bit versions. It's really the Game Boy, Game Gear, and Nintendo versions, which are all pretty similar in a lot of respects. I should say Game Gear and Nintendo are more similar than Game Boy, because Game Boy is actually a different kind of shooter with also hacking segments. And I read that in EGM, like they purposely made the Game Boy T2 different because they assumed that kids would have Terminator 2 on Nintendo. So they made a concerted effort to make it a different game. It's not very good either. Like I played it. It's a very basic Game Boy game with these dumb hacking segments that kind of sort of what's the one we're looking for, like kind of take from like John's hacking sense, like when he's hacking the ATM in the game, or excuse me, in the movie. But the Game Boy version isn't very good. The Nintendo and Game Gear versions are the two versions I think we played the most, I would say, Vito, especially the Nintendo one. They're not great. They're published by LGN, so that should tell you a lot there. And these follow the events of the movie in a certain respect. Like I think there's only 5 levels in the Nintendo version. And Vito, you and I know we've literally have seen 2.5 of them, maybe the third level a couple of times. Yeah.
I'm gonna take your word for it that there's 5 levels. I don't think we've made it to maybe level 3 and then died immediately.
Yeah. So the first level, it's just like the movie where you're at the biker bar. And it's weird because in the movie, like, Arnold arrives naked because he just traveled through time, and he's supposed to get his, your clothes, your boots, your motorcycle. But in the game, you start out clothed and you still go back in the biker bar to go beat up some biker's ass for some reason. So I remember playing that level over and over and over at your house, View, because we were just at the edge of your bed trying to get through this. And we found out how to beat the first level pretty consistently, because this was also like one of the handful of games you had at the time too, right?
Yeah. I owned this one. It was probably, I don't know, maybe I had like 5 to 8 games, and this was one of them. And back then you were stuck with the games that you owned, so you just kept playing them over and over, for better or worse.
Yeah. So the first level, I would say, like, isn't even that bad. It's really just like a basic beat all the enemies and get to the end boss and beat that. And this game, I'll give it some credit. Like, it does try to inject some variety into its 5 levels because it follows the events of the movie. The second level is when it's part of the movie when the Terminator rescues John from the canal, that like the LA canals, and the T-1000 is chasing in the big semi. And I vividly remember, again, like just trying to beat the Sula because it's at an awkward like 45-degree angle for your view. And you have to shoot the doors in front of you, and you also have to shoot the T-1000 who's in pursuit behind you. Like, you can't outrun them. You have to shoot him to get ahead. and it goes so fast. Like it's like what's that level in Battletoads? The hover bike,
Oh yeah, the hover bike level. Yeah,
right? Yeah, like
yeah.
it's not that quite fast, but I'd say it's pretty close.
But you also have to avoid obstacles too, from what I remember. So you have to juggle three things at once, and it's really hard. And that angle does not make it easy for you to shoot open the gates to pass to the next segment.
Yeah, again, so it's like you're using the Nintendo D-pad, which is like 4 cardinal directions, and one is like this awkward diagonal is the direction you're traveling in. So
Right.
it just doesn't make any freaking sense. But I still enjoy this game to some extent because of, how much we played it back then. The third level, which I barely remember because I swear we beat level 2. It must have been like less than 3 times. I don't think we got
Yeah.
past it more than that back then.
Yeah.
But you're at the hospital rescuing Sarah from the mental institution. So it
Right.
does follow, kind of the sort of beats of the movie. The fourth level, I believe, is like when you're at Cyberdyne planting bombs. And the fifth is when you're at the steel mill with another goofy battle with the T-1000 where you're just like punching him. And I think you have to like punch him into this pouring lava kind of thing.
Mhm.
And the Game Gear one, like I said, largely follows that as well. The other two versions that we'll kind of briefly get into is the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions, which are drastically different than the Nintendo version. And they came out almost a year later. I think they were like late 93, I want to say. So a year or two after the movie, you would think being on the Genesis and Super Nintendo, this would be a better game, but it's in fact not. Have you played either of these, Vito?
I played the
I can't
Super
remember.
Nintendo one for like a minute, and I was like, "Well, this is shit. I'm not gonna play this," and I just stopped playing it. But real quick, before you advance onto the Super Nintendo and Genesis one, I want to
Yeah.
mention something that always really bugged the heck out of me with the Nintendo version, is that you're playing the game. You're Arnold T800, right? And in the first level, you are punching humans, right? You're again the Terminator. You're so insanely weak. You have to punch the enemies like 10 times before they will
Yeah,
die.
you're
It's
right.
really frustrating.
Yeah, I think that is really the biggest sin of that game is the fact that the enemies take so long to kill. Like you're literally mashing B as fast as you can because you just hear the over and over
Yeah.
and over. And then the first boss is the same thing. Like I just remember crouching, you just punch him in the dick like a billion times and he finally keels over. But again, like that's not fun. That's not good game design or anything. Like it's just it's rough when I read the EGM preview where the developers are so excited and like we read through the script and we're trying to match the levels and design of the game to kind of follow the movie, and then this is what they deliver. And it's like it's not an absolutely terrible game, but like you said, like you're the T800, like you should be almost unstoppable, and you have these generic goons stopping you. It
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
make
like
any freaking sense.
you're playing the game to have like a little bit of a power fantasy. Like I'm the Terminator, I'm going to destroy these fools. But then you realize like Terminator's weaker than I was at 8 years old.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
You could fare in a fight better than the T800
Right.
apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions don't improve on that either because he's still pretty fragile. I'd say like a little bit less fragile, but
Mhm.
the Genesis and Super Nintendo ones are interesting because they do follow the movie as well. Like they actually follow them pretty well. Like it kind of lays everything out with the key beats of the movie all the same. I think there's more levels in this one, but one of the worst things it does do is introduces these driving segments, which I don't know if you recall, Vito, but there's some of the worst driving segments in like Super Nintendo 16-bit history that I've played. Like it's so awkward to control. You're like this tiny little motorcycle on this map. You have real no sense of direction of where you're supposed to go. I guess the idea is like you're kind of traveling to like the next level or something. You're supposed to kill a bunch of enemies. You've got
Mhm.
the same song playing over and over in the background, which isn't very good either. It's just like this upbeat action kind of thing. And it's just like terrible. There's nothing really great or redeeming about this game. I think the sprites are also kind of ugly. Like you can kind of tell who's who, but they're really small. The backgrounds are really just kind of nondescript and really weak. It's just like such another thing where it's like as a kid, you just feel like this is a little bit tragic where it's like you're hoping that you get a better Terminator game and they just come out with one piece of crap after another.
Yeah.
The Genesis one, I will say, is also not very good either. It has the same problems as the Super Nintendo one. One thing I should mention about these two is it has objectives, which doesn't make any freaking sense either. So it's like you have to go to these future objects and this is collect them, and then you actually have to destroy these future objects for some reason. And that's just like a goofy way to add sort of a mission thing like the T-800 is on its own mission kind of thing, where it's like, yeah, you're following the directives that John programmed you with. Like the first objective is like you have to go find John Connor's address, which I guess it's sort of like a throwback to when the Terminator had to go in Terminator 1 if you had to go look through the phone book to get Sarah
Yeah.
Connor's address because you wouldn't have that data on him, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's really weird. But the Super Nintendo ones and Genesis ones, I will say, are worse than Nintendo ones. I would feel like, Vito. I don't know how you think about that.
No, I mean, I've actually played the NES version quite a bit because I owned it, and I've kind of I don't know, grew to kind of have like a little bit of an admiration for it, even though I know it's not good. But the Super Nintendo and Genesis one, like I played through emulation, and it
Yeah.
just I don't have the same level of nostalgia. So I'm just like, no, this is crap. I don't want to play this.
Yeah, they're just not very fun to play, and like the jumping's awful. Like there's just nothing really good about the 30 or excuse me, the 16-bit version. Like you just don't feel right and they're not fun to play. And that's not to say the other ones are very much fun either, but they're more fun than what we got with these at least.
Mm-hmm.
Next scenes we'll cover kind of briefly here is RoboCop versus the Terminator. This is not related to the movies. This is actually based on a comic series that was out in the mid 90s. I think it had like 4 different parts to it. I'm not familiar with the comics at all. But it's really just sort of like one of those ultimate crossovers of the 90s, I think, where it's like you got RoboCop versus the Terminator. Unfortunately, you don't play the Terminator in these games, which I think
No.
was a miss. I don't know if there's some issue with that. Um,
Well, I think the comic, going back to the comic, I think Frank Miller might have wrote that comic.
oh, did he?
Yeah, and RoboCop was the protagonist. So I think they're following, the comic, is even though you'll talk about Genesis doesn't really have I guess, a story so much in that version, but I think they're trying to stay
Yeah.
kind of true to the comics. Yeah.
Yeah, this is so it's released on all the systems like the other games, where it's released Game Gear. There's a Game Boy version. There was a Master System in the UK apparently, and then the older versions are Super Nintendo and Genesis, which pretty similar overall. Like they're done by different developers, but their formats are kind of same, and the feel as far as the atmosphere is similar. Like I would say the Genesis version, I like how that one looks more. I don't know have you played that version? I think you only played Super Nintendo, right, Vito?
Yeah, I've only played Super Nintendo.
Yeah, so we could talk a little bit about that, but
Yeah.
the Genesis one I think is the better version. It's considerably more bloody and gory. It's like one of those early 90s games where they kind of let loose, and I was shocked that even the Game Gear one was just as gory. Like it was very similar to the Genesis version. More gore than I would expect for a game this early, especially like this is like prime Mortal Kombat time where there's all this controversy about in-game violence, and this one was pretty freaking violent in the Genesis. I was actually very surprised about that.
Yeah, yeah.
The Super Nintendo one, I think this one does look better, which is typically the case on Super Nintendo. And both of these are just kind of side-scrolling shooters. They're I don't want to say like Contra, but they're a little bit more grounded than that. Like they're just really, like you go level by level. There's usually a boss at the end, and then in the
Mhm.
Super Nintendo version, there's these really cool comic cutscenes that tie the story together. Whereas the Genesis one, because it's by Virgin Games, which totally different developer there, it doesn't really have any cutscenes in between the levels, so it's just sort of like one thing after next. But they have like similar themes in their levels. They're like similar in layouts and everything like that. It's just there's obviously differences because these weren't developed at the same company more or less. But do you have many memories of the Super Nintendo one? Because I know the box was one of the more badass things we ever saw back then
Yeah,
too.
so my main memory of that is the box, the hard plastic, like, box. And I was just telling you before we started recording, I've been looking for that freaking game, CIB, for a while, and I have not seen it in person probably since the 90s. And I just want to get it for the box, you know?
Yeah, the box is this really thick has a really thick top shell, like, it's probably one of the most sturdy Super Nintendo boxes that aged well. I think the underside was cardboard, if I remember, I
It
can't fully
was,
recall
yeah,
because
it was.
yeah, I used to own it, and I remember, like, my mom was tossing a bunch of stuff away when I was younger, and that was one of the things we tossed away, and I've always been like that's always in the back of my mind, I was like, "I need to get this again," but, oh, crap, it's, like, $210 or something ridiculous, it's up there. But these 2 games are really good. I'd say, like, you can't go wrong with either Super Nintendo or Genesis versions. Like I said, I prefer the Genesis one just because it's faster. I like how RoboCop looks in this one too. Like he's a little bit more slender. And he looks like RoboCop. Where
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because of the aspect ratio on Super Nintendo, but he looks kind of like wide and fat in a weird way.
Mhm.
I don't know how to explain it. Um,
Yeah.
it's a really fun game though. It's just like it's not like anything you really play at the time because it is like a really dark and gritty shooter. But it's worth tracking down. I don't think they're terribly expensive. You just want like a loose cart for either version.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you knew, and maybe you mentioned this and I didn't catch it, but there was a NES version that was being developed and they canceled it.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that. No.
yeah, somebody dumped the ROM, and I actually have the ROM on my Steam Deck, and I've played it. And for an incomplete game, it's not bad for an incomplete NES game. It's
How does it
basically.
play?
I mean, to me, it plays like the Super Nintendo one, just not. I mean, it's NES, so there's some limitations,
Mhm.
obviously, but it's more or less the same thing, just with all what quote unquote dumbed down graphics and controls.
I'm surprised. Well, I guess that kinda makes sense because, like I said, they did release it on the portable systems too, so
Yeah,
maybe by this point, they just figured it wasn't worth releasing on Nintendo. I don't know. It's kinda weird.
yeah,
But I don't again, I don't know how good it would've been either if it actually had been fully released. Because again, most of these games were not very good at this time, and I think
yeah.
there
And
was RoboCop 3 might have been out this time, I can't recall.
oh yeah, no, the RoboCop 3 was out around this time, and you're talking about towards the end of NES's lifespan, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
might
Because
get
these
some
were
gems here, but
yeah, these were like 94, mid 94, so, NES was probably on its last couple legs, even though it was kind of like dwindling. The 16-bit systems were definitely on the rise by 94, 95. So it makes
right,
sense that they probably just canceled it for budgetary reasons or something like that.
yeah, they probably figured it
So
wasn't going to
those
sell.
yeah, exactly, right? I think it
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
All right, so those are the sort of early games we're going to cover. After this, there were quite a few Terminator games released over time, especially with Terminator 3. Like that came out in 2003 in the theaters, so they had a few games related on that. I won't talk too much about those. There was also Terminator Dawn of Fate, which I think was a pretty cool prequel kind of story game where this took place in the future war. And I forgot the whole story of this game, unfortunately, but I remember the biggest thing about Dawn of Fate was that your baton that you had, your melee baton, was stronger than your weapons. And I remember that being called out in reviews where it's like you just basically destroy a T-100 by slapping it to death with this stupid electric baton. So that's like one of my main memories of that one. I got to the end and it got really, really difficult, but I'd say like the reviews for that, I think it was like in the middle of the road, maybe kind of terrible, maybe justified, but I still thought it was like kind of a cool idea. So we'll fast forward through all that stuff because we'd be in a whole other episode if we try to talk about the middle of the games. Plus, I don't think we have too much fun in this release to begin with.
no,
Um,
no.
yeah, so we'll get into what do we got here. We'll go into Terminator Resistance, and then we'll finish off with No Fate because that's really the big thing we want to talk about. So, Terminator Resistance. This is one of the newest games that come out for Terminator. This is released January 2020 for the PC, PS4, and Xbox One. Then they made sort of an enhanced and complete edition that was released on PS5 and Series X. These are developed by Teon, which developer you may know from the RoboCop games. Those are really fun games. These are like B level games, maybe like I don't know. Would you say double A, not triple A?
Double A, yeah, definitely double A.
Double A.
Yeah,
Yeah, this developer, they're probably like a really small team, but I will say one thing they are excellent at is nailing a franchise or an IP like this, because both the Terminator and RoboCop games absolutely feel like the respective franchises. It's really, really
yeah,
incredible. That's really what makes these two games great more than anything else.
yeah,
So this one is kind of like a Fallout Light. This one takes place in 2028. You play as a guy named Jacob Rivers, and you're in the beginning. It starts out with an infiltrator attack, which is basically sort of like these squads of machines that come out to sort of find humans, either take them hostage or kill them. And then at some point, he joins a group of survivors who their whole thing is to find codes to hack Skynet's mainframe and stop the machines. I don't know how it really fits in like the main story leading into going back in time. So this has this sort of like side story. I don't know if it's canon technically, but I really love this game. I don't know how much you got to play through it, Vito, because I know you said you got through most of it. But it's really just like a collecting, crafting kind of game. You have like a main sort of hub like Fallout, where it's like you have your settlement where you talk to your fellow survivors. There's like romance options. It's a really, really fun game. I really like this one.
yeah. I enjoyed it. You're the one that actually told me that I should give it a shot because I had played RoboCop Rogue City because that just looked amazing and I really enjoyed that. And you're like, well, if you like that one, try Terminator. So I picked it up on one of the hunting excursions that we went to like I don't know a year ago, and I
Mhm.
started it, and it's one of those games where I started, I was really into it, but then something else came out and kind of pulled me away from it, and I need to go back to finish it. But like everything you said is right. It really reminds me of like a kind of smaller Fallout type game. It definitely nails like all the aspects of the Terminator franchise, like with the different Terminators and robots that are flying around that you fight and the weapons and everything. Now it is a double A level game, so there is some jank with it, kind of the same like
Yeah.
within RoboCop. Like you'll run into some bugs and some weird stuff that happens, but it's definitely worth the playthrough. I think, especially if you're fond of the franchise like we are. It's a good time.
Yeah, this game is interesting to me because I feel like if it wasn't a Terminator game, I might be less forgiving of some of its jankiness, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they've patched it since because I beat it when it came out, and I played it once the PS5 version came out because they released this cool infiltrator mode where you actually play as the T-800 in the future, and you're hunting down like these resistance leaders. And it's great because they have all these little nuggets of references and Easter eggs. Like one of the ones you find in the infiltrator mode is you go into like this, I think it's like a destroyed bar, and then you go to like the cash register, you find something in the register, and you trigger it, and it plays the Burning in the Third Degree song by Triangles that plays in Tech Noir. So sort of like a loose thread, like this might have been Tech Noir at some point in time, which is really cool. But again, like that's really what makes these games successful is how it's all the attention to detail, like all the music, the sound effects, like they just sound straight out of the movies. Like these are the games that I think you and I wish we had when we were kids. Like this is
Oh
what
yeah.
Terminator games should have been back then.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would have loved this as a kid, and same thing with the next one that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I guess there should be a good way to get into it now. Actually, is we'll finish off with really the main event, which is sort of like this whole episode is really set up as a chronology of Terminator, but it's more just sort of like I guess reviewing impressions for Terminator 2D No Fate, which you and I have been waiting for since the moment that trailer dropped. That was announced. We're like, holy shit,
Yeah.
this looks really
Yeah.
incredible. So it finally came out over this past week as of this recording. It's I don't know who the developer is. I should pull that up on here too. But it's essentially sort of like a retro throwback shooter, and I would say it has more to do with the Sega CD game than anything else. But it really just tries to tie in like everything that was I don't want to say good about the original games, but like all the ideas of the original games and made it into its own thing, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, it's definitely like I got Contra vibes for it, like kind of fast paced, run and gun,
Yeah,
like just try not to take any damage, rack up as much points as you can. And it really follows it adds some stuff to the plot of Terminator 2. But what's interesting is it takes like story beats that maybe, like you said, were in the script that you read but didn't make it into the movie.
yeah, that's what I was really impressed with because I'd say it's safe to say like I've seen Terminator 2 like dozens, if not hundreds of times. So it's like there's things
Yeah.
where these little details that they added that I was really shocked to see. Like one of the things was there's a point in the story in the game that they added in where it's a point where John in the future finds the time displacement equipment in the future, and he sees that the T800 and T1000 have been sent back to 1990 or excuse me 1984, 1991. And then what they do is they send Kyle back and they free program T800 and they destroy the facility. That wasn't in the movie, but it was written into the script because I read through it. I was like, oh wow, like that's pretty incredible that they included this in the game. Like I really don't see anyone referencing that ever really.
Right, and then pretty much I think the first two out of the first three levels are Sarah Connor infiltrating Cyberdyne and then getting captured. And that's just the
Yeah.
one line from the movie where they say, "Oh, she tried to blow up a computer factory," and they made like basically
Yes.
three levels out of it.
And that's how she gets, that's how she gets thrown into the mental institutions. That's
Right.
like that sort of loose thread of continuity where, yeah, she's shown infiltrating Cyberdyne, and they catch her because she sees the prototype for the T800. Like they had advanced so far, probably
Mhm.
because she realized that they had the chip and maybe the arm. Actually, no, she didn't, because in the movie, that's how she finds out how they developed it. Is that Dyson tells them like, oh, we had the chip and the arm.
Right.
So that's the thing is in the game, she didn't know. That's when she discovered like, oh crap, they're building a Terminator. So again, it's just awesome that they took that because this follows the events of the movie, but not to a degree of like the earlier games did, where it's like it tried to go
No.
beat by beat. This is where it adds sort of a different those threads of continuity, I guess we'll call them, and these other scenes that weren't necessarily in the movie, and also has stuff that was in the movie. Like you go into that whole scene with the T100, which I'm surprised at how little you play as the T100 so far. The whole scene is like you're this naked Arnold who you don't see his face because they can't get his likeness, but
Right.
you're naked in the bar with the same music, the Cadillac, and I forgot what it's called by Dwight Yoakam
Yeah.
playing of him trying to get his clothes, his boots, and his motorcycle. And it's just such a like I was smiling the whole time because it's just such a great thing to see and feel because again, this is what we wanted with the Nintendo one back then, and we're getting it
Well,
like 33 years later.
and as soon as the boss for that level comes up, like "Bad to the Bone" starts playing in the back, the
Yeah.
actual song. I'm like, "Oh, this is really amazing." And I really love this game, but that is my one very minor gripe is that you don't play as a T800 very much. Not in the
Yeah.
main story, I'll say, without spoiling. Not in the main official Terminator 2 story that's in the game. You don't. There's some other time when
Yes.
you do.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that, in a moment because I wanna get through some of the levels we have here because I played through this on normal, and one thing I was surprised about because there's story mode, there's arcade, there's actually a few other modes you can unlock in this game, which is really cool. But in story mode, once you lose all of your continues, I was surprised that you start the whole game over again. I thought maybe,
Yeah.
a lot of games now like Neon Inferno and a few other games where they have like a story mode and arcade mode. Story mode, usually like when you lose all your lives, you start back at the beginning of the level, which, it's fine, it's whatever. This, I was like, oh, I got to
Yeah.
start from level one. There's like 12 levels in here. I died on level 12. So it's not too bad. Like, I feel like the difficulty, at least on normal, is pretty reasonable because, once you learn the levels, it's not so bad. And there's not really anything a whole lot cheap so far on normal. Like, I played through it
No.
twice and I was like, well, it's not bad once you learn it.
Right, but then you get, if you try the next level up, which is called Hasta La Vista.
Hmm.
The first two levels, I was like, okay, this is doable, and then I got to level 3, and it was like a nightmare of just just stuff, hazards everywhere, enemies. I'm like, oh god, this is going to take me many times to get through this level on this difficulty.
Yeah, I hit the same wall because I was like, well, I'll try it on hard because I usually try to play these games on hard, and I felt like it was just going through the first levels like a breeze. Like, wow, this feels great, and then
Yeah,
I was like, holy crap, there's way more enemies. The bullets travel way faster. I was like, I just gotta experience this on normal first and
right.
get through it. But it is interesting, like you said, though, Vito, because you don't get to play too much as a T800, at least in the main path, which follows the movie. You do get to play as John as a kid for like a moment when he's on the motorcycle trying to escape the T1000 pursuing him on LA streets.
Mhm.
And then you go through the great level, which again, playing the Nintendo one back then and playing this now is just like obviously like just night and day because there's a 30-year difference, obviously. But when I played the new version and you're in the canal and the T800, they show the scene where like he picks John off his motorcycle. They got every little detail in this. It's really
Right.
incredible. But the level where you're escaping the T1000, the semi, is so much better than what it was on the Nintendo because you're going on these speed strips. You shoot the T1000 because it's sort of like a boss fight behind you, or normally you shoot these gates in front of you, which again, it's like happened in the Nintendo version, but it's
Yeah.
so much better in this one.
Yeah, I remember when I first started playing that level, I had a little bit of PTSD flashback to the Nintendo.
Yeah,
But
I had
this one
flashbacks
is
too.
it's far more manageable on normal difficulty in this game than it is in the NES game. Now I can't say on Hasta La Vista what it'll be like
Mhm.
because I haven't gotten that far yet. So I guess we'll see whenever I get there.
Yeah, I'd like to play through it on Hasta La Vista for sure because I really do enjoy this game. Like I played through it at least twice so far,
Yeah,
and it's everything what I want for like a side-scrolling shooter. Plus, of course, the Terminator 2 theme just makes it even better. And then the rest of the levels in the game, like usually plays like Sarah at some points. Like you're escaping the Tuscadero facility.
yeah,
And it's great because you even pick the locks like she does, and they got even details of like how she slides in. Like I don't know if you remember the movie where she slides at one point to take
yeah.
down the guard. They got that for her animation. I triggered the alarm. And it's the exact same sound as the alarm in the movie. Um, and again, you're being pursued by the T1000, and it gets some of the key scenes from there too, where like the T1000 goes to the prison bars. But this is sort of like the stealth level of the game too, because I think one thing this game does really well is it has different gameplay styles, usually throughout each level. Like
Yeah,
Sarah plays differently when she has like the commando outfit. She plays differently when she's trying to get out of the mental institution. You have Arnold, which in an alternate pathway has the minigun, so he has a whole different gameplay thing too. And then you also play as future John Connor in future areas, which is really cool too because those feel like the Sega CD game to me more than anything
and
else.
those levels actually feel the most like Contra to me because you get the weapon, different weapon types like the spread shot and the homing shot and all that. I'm like, this is like dead on like
Well,
Contra.
and you literally fight like that giant wall of
The
guns
wall,
like in
yeah,
Contra. Yeah, so it's
yeah,
a perfect. And even like the one of the bosses in that you fight, I think it's the Flying HK, the Hunter Killer. That looks like the boss from like Contra 3 or like when that plane swoops in Contra 3
yeah,
and destroys the area. It's just, I mean, it's just this thing doesn't hide its influences at all. It's by Bitmap Bureau, that's who it was. And
yeah,
they've done games like Xeno Crisis and all these sort of like really good 2D shooter games, and they've just nailed Terminator 2 No Fate like nothing else. Like I really had high expectations for this. I feel like they totally delivered.
yeah. I agree.
So now I think let's talk about some of the alternate paths, which I think you and I pursued the same last night because we kind of got through it. But one thing this game does to kind of extend the replay value, because it is like an arcade game, which is only like an hour. It's $30 for me. I'd say it's 100% worth it because I like supporting these type of
I
games,
agree.
and
Yeah.
it's an arcade experience. So it's like I expect it to be an hour and a half, depending on the game, whatever it is. But this does add a few bits to for the replay value, where once you beat the story mode at least once, now when you play through the game, there's certain story choices you have that actually change the story pretty drastically in some drastic ways. Like one of the first ones is when you're reprogramming the T-800 chip, you could also just have Sarah order it to kill Dyson, which the T-800 isn't supposed to kill anything necessarily.
Yeah.
But in this instance, you could tell to go kill Miles Dyson, and that changes the outcome of the ending, where Sarah ends up, what is it? They can't get the chip and the arm out of Cyberdyne now, thus not preventing the war, and Judgment Day happens anyway.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I knew once she killed Dyson, I'm like, oh, she's not going to find the arm and the chip. So they think they're going to stop at Judgment Day, but they're not going to. And it's interesting too because at the end when T-1000 falls into the lava, John immediately like runs away, and she's like, "Where did he go? I was looking for him for years or whatever and couldn't find him." And then you play as old Sarah Connor in the future, fighting the future war, which is an interesting wrinkle.
It's really cool, yeah, where she's almost sort of like atoning for her sort of self-imposed sin, where she's now out to find out and actually find John and actually help him because he's been captured by like these other two big old T-800s. And she's basically like, "Oh, I'm sorry for all this." And John, being the future resistance leader he is, like, "No, it's fine. We're going to figure this out," kind of thing. So it's really cool because it's a what if scenario that you never really expect, and it doesn't really, it's not significant in any way, but it's just something interesting where it's like, if this didn't happen at a pivotal point in the story, does this change things? And there's also a couple more choices later where when Sarah busts into Miles Dyson's house, you can actually have her kill him. I don't know what that outcome becomes. I forgot what the third choice was. I think there was another option. I forgot what it leads to too. That's towards the end after that. I can't really recall.
Oh, I don't know. I remember the first two, but I haven't done the second choice with Sarah killing Dyson because
me neither. Yeah. Fortunately, you can play through on easy and choose those alternate paths too. So that's what I did last night. Like I just got through because it's like half an hour, 40 minutes, and you get through. And then now there's different levels too. Also, it introduces a new level in that pathway too. Like you play as the T-100 with the minigun. And you also have the scene where he's standing on the Cyberdyne window and he's shooting down all the police cars, which I thought was really cool too. So, it sucks like you don't get to play the T-100 too often, but it is pretty cool. They add like this level where you're just like a running gun, literal machine, cutting down officers and Cyberdyne agents and whatever else.
I had a little nitpick with that level, even though you're playing as a T-800. So they established because his chip remains in read only, and he doesn't get it reset to learn, that he doesn't learn anything from John like he does in the movie to become like not a killer, pretty much. So in the level, you're mowing down all these cops and security guards, and then you're then shooting the cop cars, and at the end when you destroy all the cars, it says 0 casualties, and I'm like, this Terminator wouldn't care.
I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
Well, also, it was weird to me because, the cops are shooting at you as you're shooting the cars. And I definitely shot at the, because it's just like spreading around. I was like, oh, no casualties. Huh? Like, I thought I was supposed to just mow everything down in front of me,
Yeah.
So it was a weird thing. I just thought that was kind of a weird thing that they included anyway. But it's also interesting because that's a scene in the movie, in the main movie. So it's weird that they didn't include that normally for like the normal pathway kind of thing too,
Yeah, and that, like I said, that was my minor gripe about this, is there wasn't a lot of T-800 in the main story path, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, the sort of the canon path, I guess we'll call it, right?
Path, yeah.
And then there is a boss rush mode that you can unlock. There's also very hard, and I forgot. There's one called like the Mother of All Fates or something like that.
Mother of the Future, I think.
Mother of the Future.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, for that we'll have to figure that out because I think you have to beat all the alternate pathways, all the alternate story paths, and then you unlock that. But I have no idea what that mode is. But I'm really interested. And there's also a cheat menu too that you can unlock.
Oh, I didn't even realize that. There's a cheat menu.
Yeah, it's in the options menu. And then listener Nick told me, he sent me a message earlier saying that you can unlock the cheat menu by highlighting it and hitting left a bunch of times. Like, I guess there's a cheat code to just unlock it, because otherwise you have to beat very hard to unlock it.
Oh, okay.
I have to see how that works. I didn't get to try it yet, but yeah. Yeah, but over like this is definitely like the ultimate love letter to Terminator 2. Like this is absolutely the game that we wish we had when we were kids.
Oh yeah.
And it is just like, like the sprite work is just stellar. They got pretty much all the music with the exception of Guns N' Roses in the soundtrack, like all the music from the movie. It is just like such a fantastic and wonderful package. This is just like such a great sort of like Contra-like Terminator game. I'm really happy that it turned out as good as it did.
Yeah, I know. If only the cherry on top would be Arnold just granting his license like after the fact, and they could like
That's
attach
the
it in.
only thing that's missing, I think. Yeah. It's really weird because they got Linda Hamilton, or at least young Linda Hamilton in there, and they got young Edward Furlong. So I don't know if maybe there's like different rights for different
Yeah,
things. Like maybe Arnold has like a special license or something.
they had to individually get their rights, and that was the interesting is they got, and I don't even know this actor's name. They got the actor that played adult John Connor in Terminator 2 to grant his
That's right.
likeness. You know?
Yeah, he's in they show ports of him too, which is really
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if that guy's been in any other movies. I don't even know what his name
No
is, but I
idea.
thought that was pretty incredible. Yeah. Like, I guess my only nitpick is like I wish the game could be even longer, but that's just because I love it so much. At least so far,
Yeah.
like it's been such a great time with it. But I think normal mode has 12 levels, and then you do get a few extra levels with those alternate pathways. I don't know what the pathway I haven't explored yet has, but I think there's probably around 15 levels total from what I read. I could be wrong about that, or maybe I misread it or
I think
something.
it's 16. I think it's 16, yeah. The
15 or
one
16.
up.
Okay, still
Yeah.
like, that's still a pretty beefy arcade game, I would say. Easy mode is great if you want to try that out because it's, the enemies go down a lot quicker. You also have infinite continues, which is a big thing, but unfortunately, like, that may not help if you're actually, it does help because you won't have to restart the whole game. So infinite continues are good
Yeah.
in easy mode. Normal mode, you start out with like 3 or 4, and then there are a set amount you can find hidden in the levels. I found most of them because I think I'm missing one because there's a trophy to get all of them.
Yeah.
And then I don't even know what very hard or hard has. Like I can't imagine how many continues you have and how much more difficult it must be for those.
Yeah, and I realized pretty well, I won't say quickly, but it's where all the Cyberdyne logos are, is where the continues are hidden. Like if you
Yes.
find them in the
Yes.
background, you shoot them, and then they open up. And apparently, there's so in the first 2 levels, you could get the weapon power up for Sarah, but then in the third level, I could never find it. But I guess you get an achievement if you find it in in all 3 of the first
Yeah.
levels. Yeah,
And I was like,
so I don't know
how
where
hidden
it is.
are they? Because I feel like I was reasonably thorough with these levels.
Yeah.
So I'm like, they must be like in places I'm not looking. You have to shoot something very specific because I only found the one assault rifle in the first level, like you said,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't find it for the rest of the game. And then I saw the achievement or the trophy the same way. I was like, oh, there's more.
Do
I've
you want
missed
me to
them all
tell
this time.
you where the second level assault rifle is if you haven't found
Where
it?
is it? No, I
Okay,
haven't.
so
No.
in the very beginning of the level, you climb up like the scaffolding, and then you go down. There's a dog, and then right
Yeah.
behind the dog, there's like a barrel that if you shoot too much, it'll explode. Well, don't shoot too much because you need the barrel to stand on it, and there's a ladder that you could only reach if you stand on the
Oh
barrel,
my
and it's
god.
right up
Yeah.
there. And I found it by accident. It wasn't even like like I was looking for it. I was like, "Ooh, it's up here," and then I found the assault rifle. This was in level 2.
Yeah.
Level 3, I don't know where it is.
I don't know how apparent it would have been because I definitely missed that because I'm usually just like I know where the enemies are on like normal, right? So I'm just like
Yeah,
shooting where I know enemies are coming, especially with barrels. So
yeah.
I preemptively didn't even yeah, I kind of preemptively screwed myself in the sense. Oh man. All right, Vito. Well, I don't know. Any final impressions on Terminator 2D No Fate? I think we kind of expressed our appreciation for the game and what Bitmap Muro's done. I think it's a really great game. But any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
I mean, T2D No Fate is, like we said, it's the game I wish we had as a kid, and I think it was well worth the wait and the little bit of delays that we had associated with it. It's really, really fun and encourages multiple runs, to get higher points and all that. I think it's definitely worth
Yeah.
your time and
I
money. $30 is a good price for it.
I think that's one of the key things. It's like there's a lot like Neon Inferno is pretty cut and dry. Right? I really enjoyed that game. It's like 15, $20, wherever it is. But once you beat it, like there's not really a whole lot you can do after the fact.
Mm,
I think it's great here that they did recognize, like, yeah, this is an arcade experience. It's an hour at most if you're, maybe not adept to action games, but there's a
yeah,
lot more replay value in here. There's also like an infinite mode and a few other things. So they try and make, the best bang for your buck. And also like, $30 might seem steep for an arcade game, but for me, it's also the fact that Terminator 2 is probably not an easy or not a cheap license to have for something
no,
like this. So it's fine. Plus, it's inevitably going to go on sale. Like if you find it for 15
for
bucks,
sure.
it's a steal, And I'm sure if you're a Terminator fan, you probably already bought it, and you're probably nodding your head with everything we're saying with this as well.
And I really like the fact that recently we've been getting a lot of these like 80s and 90s like licenses turned into like these really good video games. And it's probably the
Yeah.
only way these franchises are really going to live on into the future. Because as we've seen, unfortunately, with Terminator, after T2, the movies are kind of not very good.
Oh yeah, that's a whole. Oh my god, that could be a whole separate podcast for you and I dissecting what we think about the other movies. Even though
Yeah,
I can enjoy them, but I'm definitely very, very, very critical of a lot of them. So
yeah,
it's interesting, yeah. But yeah, I think it's great because in my eyes, I feel like it's maybe some of the people who grew up in the same generation we did are like, look, we're tired of these awful ass games for the franchises we grew up with. We're gonna make them like they should have been made 35 years ago.
exactly. Yeah, yep,
And it finally pays off. So this game, absolutely worth it. I'd say it's worth checking out for sure.
agreed.
All right, Vito. Well, I think we're coming to the end after our Terminator journey here. So
Mm.
for anyone out there who wants to talk about Terminator or talk about games, just send us some mail. You can reach out to us at legiongamingpod@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at Legion Gaming Podcasts. Vito, where can they find you on the interwebs?
You could find me on Instagram at 8BitBarrister. Give me a follow, shoot me a message. We could talk Terminator or whatever other games or movies that you want to talk about. I'm usually game to talk about anything. So give me
Yeah,
a follow.
yeah, Vito and I are pretty much game to talk about games all the time, which is
Yeah,
why it works well. It's pretty great.
all right.
Thank you all for listening. Vito, thank you for coming on here at very short notice and talking
Anytime.
about
It's always
Terminator for
fun.
like an hour and a half or the hell it's been.
Yeah, no, anytime. Always fun.
Thank you. And for everyone else listening, thank you for listening as always. Thank you for bearing with us with this new sort of via satellite journey, as I'll call it. And join us in a couple weeks when we'll have a new episode talking about all about 1995.